Tomorrow is the trade deadline, and the New York Mets are in a lot of rumors right now. What's real, what's not, and what will the Mets do on Thursday? We'll be talking about all of that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, it was a brutal game for the New York Mets on Tuesday night. They only got 4 hits collectively. 2 of them came from Mark Vientos, 1 from Jeff McNeil, 1 from Luis Torrens, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Juan Soto. They all continue to struggle. In the 5th inning, the Mets loaded the bases for Francisco Lindor, and he struck out. That was his 3rd strikeout of the game, and the Mets were only in the 5th inning. He ended up grounding out in his final at-bat to avoid the dreaded golden sombrero, but a rough game for Lindor. After Lindor's strikeout, Starling Marte drove in the 1 Mets run of the game, a sacrifice fly in a bases-loaded situation. Marte replaced Tyrone Taylor, who had replaced Juan Soto, who exited the game after fouling one off of his foot. The fact, though, that Tyrone Taylor did not get that opportunity to bat with the bases loaded because the Mets were just so desperate to score runs at that point that they wanted Starling Marte's bat in the lineup, and they were willing to stick Marte out in right field for a couple of innings because of the way Taylor has swung the bat. That does say a lot about where they're at with their incumbent center fielder and what they might plan to do at this deadline. So something we'll still be talking about throughout the show. Now, again, offensively, that was it for the Mets. They just really struggled. Once you get into the teeth of that Padres bullpen and they have a lead, it's pretty brutal. The Mets should have done more earlier on in the game. Once you start to see Estrada, Morajón, all these guys come out of that bullpen, your chances are limited. It's a really good Padres team at holding on to leads. It's how they sort of outperform expectations when it comes to their record, just based on some of the other performances you look at. We look at their starting rotation being a little bit closer to average and their lineup being well below average. They're still winning games because of that bullpen. That's what happened in this one. Sean Manaea was solid. Starting for the Mets, allowed 1 run on 3 hits, no walk, struck out 4 in 5 innings pitched, got up to 86 pitches, probably could have gone 6 if not for a really rough final inning. Not that he gave up any runs, but just some hard fought at bats, a 14 pitch at bat by Jake Cronenworth, which ended in a fly out, but that sort of knocked out an inning potentially for Manaea, who maybe could have gone 6 and seemed to want to get 6. But Mendoza shut him down at those 86 pitches. But still, a good step in the right direction for Manaea, who is showing nothing else. His stuff still plays. It still plays when he's attacking the zone. Guys are very uncomfortable and at bats. The question just is, will he be able to take on more of a workload and pitch deeper into starts? And also just how is he going to hold up? Because it does feel like he's still just not completely 100% comfortable. He's doing a good job. He's getting outs, but it's not as effortless as it was where it felt like at the end of last season. And granted, that was Sean Manaea at the best performance that he had got himself to, that peak level that he's probably ever had in his career. So it's tough to compare against that. But again, there was those starts last year around this time, when he got into August, September, where Manaea was taking the ball and it seemed like he could just throw that fastball in the zone and dot it whenever he wanted to. And it didn't take much effort. So I'll be curious to see how he builds off of this, but still a solid start from him. It was just a disaster for Jose Butto, who comes in, gives up a run in the 6th inning. In the 7th inning, gives up 2 singles, then an RBI double that scores both. He was pulled after walking a batter with 2 outs, and then Chris Devanski came on and gave up a 3-run homer. So 5 earned runs attributed to Butto, 1 to Devanski, and the Mets end up losing the series as they drop both of the first 2 games here in San Diego. They also lose the game to the Phillies, I believe, because when I checked last, the Phillies had they ended up winning. They won 6-3 to the White Sox. So now, what is it, a half game lead in this division with 1 game left to play before the deadline. You got Clay Holmes going up against Yu Darvish. Darvish has not been good this year, so that's the matchup that we're going to watch this afternoon. 4:10 start Eastern time, day game on the West Coast at 1:10 Pacific. And so we'll see what the Mets can do. We'll see if they're going to be able to find their way to beat the Padres and at least take a game in this series. They probably aren't going to have Juan Soto in the lineup after fouling that ball off his foot. The early x-rays are negative. They're saying he's day-to-day. I just don't think that they're going to rush him back out there for a day game after a night game when he hurt himself. You have Pete Alonso, who is clutching his knee a little bit. So we'll see if he's good to go day game after a night game. Maybe the Mets, put Vientos at first base again and DH Pete Alonso to keep his bat in the lineup, because I don't think Soto is going to be able to DH, and just cobble it together and see what they could do against Darvish. But at this point, that the Mets are just ready to get out of San Diego and wait and see what David Stearns is going to do at this deadline. It's good that they have Thursday off. A lot of teams do. There's only 3 games played on Thursday. So I think we're going to see things really start to pick up after games are finished tomorrow or today, as you guys are listening to this on Wednesday. I think teams that are on the fence might decide to pull the trigger. And I also think that you're just going to get, some teams that once they play their game and they know they have the Thursday off day, you don't have to deal with the awkwardness of a trade happening in the middle of the game. There's the hug watch and everyone's wondering who's going to move, who's not. I think a lot of business is going to take place on Wednesday night, leading into Thursday morning and throughout the day. So I think that's what you can expect things to pick up. As far as the rumors swirling around the Mets that we're going to talk about on the show today, they are still attached to Luis Robert, but now Luisangel Acuña's name is being floated instead of Mark Vientos. So we'll talk about that a little bit in the next segment. The Mets have apparently been in on Brandon Lowe for over a year now, according to Andy Martino. And they're also listening on everybody, including Jeff McNeil, which I think is honestly just the fact that you're not going to say, oh, no, I'm not curious what we could get for Jeff McNeil at this deadline. I doubt they move him, but that's just one of those things where I think the Mets are open to having a bunch of different conversations, and you can see where you end up with them. But right now, as you're looking at this deadline, what we're going to talk about more here in the next segment, again, the latest on Luis Robert, the different rumors around Brandon Lowe, and just where the Mets are at when it comes to adding him back to this lineup, where they're at with their internal players. Are they really going to move one of these guys? Are they going to stand pat? Should they sell high on someone like Brett Beatty or Jeff McNeil, who are playing a lot better than we would have expected 2 months ago? There's a lot that could be done at this deadline, and it seems like the Mets have open ears to really plot their best course. So it could be a deadline where 6 o'clock hits on Thursday, and we look up and we say, okay, well, the Mets got a reliever after the Gregory Soto trade. They picked up one more arm, and it wasn't a closer type. It was some type of a setup arm, and okay, that's their deadline. Or it could be, oh, wow, the Mets made a lot of crazy moves. They traded a young player that could be part of their core moving forward, whether that's an Acuña or Vientos. And, oh, wow, they were able to pull off a trade for a starting pitcher and a closer, and they got a new center fielder. So we still don't know which way the Mets are going to go, but we'll start to dive into the rumors a little bit more here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you want to head to the ballpark with your friends or family and check out a game? That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With Game Time, you can buy tickets fast and simple, and prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. That's why I don't buy my tickets until I'm about to walk into the ballpark, and then I will look for their incredible deals on last-minute tickets. You can find clear seat views. You can view your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And there's a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Maybe you want to check out Mets Giants over the weekend at Citi Field. You can go to Game Time to do exactly that and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button to help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. And make sure if you do hit that subscribe button, you hit that notification bell as well, so you're notified anytime that we go live. I'll be going live if the Mets make a trade today or tomorrow. At any point, I will hop on and do my rapid reaction to whatever the news is. And also, you have Chris Schubert doing the Locked On Mets postcast, giving you a show right after the final out of every Mets game. So again, hit that subscribe button and make sure the notifications are on. Let's talk about some of these rumors. Now, Luis Robert continues to be connected to the New York Mets. Mark Feinsand even said that the Mets are being viewed now as a front runner to land Luis Robert. And all of a sudden, it is Luisangel Acuña's name that is being floated as a name that is being discussed in a Luis Robert trade. Now, would I give up the next, 5 years of control beyond this season for Luisangel Acuña to get 2 months of Luis Robert, assuming that you're not going to pick up that $20 million club option for next season, and you'll pay the $2 million buyout? It's a tough one. It really is, because on the surface, I say, why can't you get a deal done with prospects? If there's any piece that can help the 2025 New York Mets, a big league ready piece. When you think about, you see Soto fouling a ball off his foot. I hate to bring it up, and we'll knock on all the wood, and we'll cross our fingers, and we'll do all the things, but what happens if Lodor goes down? Are you really comfortable with Ronnie Mauricio being your starting shortstop? Defensively, Ronnie Mauricio out there every single inning at short, if that were to happen. To me, Luisangel Acuña is very important for the Mets due to his depth, the depth that he provides at so many different positions, the defense. He goes out there for the first time, I guess the second time. I guess he played center field earlier this season. I can't really recall that appearance, but when they were finishing off that game against the Padres, they moved stuff around and they got Acuña out there for a couple of innings. First play, a shallow fly ball, and Acuña on his horse makes a diving catch, and Jeff McNeil played 3 balls that were hit like that in front of him. So you see the difference in having a legit center fielder out there. And Acuña is not a legit center fielder. He's a shortstop that can just play anywhere. So I look at Acuña and I almost even wonder, all right, compare Acuña's at-bats to Tyrone Taylor. Is that really a worse option when the Mets aren't starting Jeff McNeil? Should they just stick Acuña out there? And I don't know. There's a part of me that is a fan of Acuña and the role that he can serve on this team for the next 5 years. A guy that can just do anything defensively on the diamond, brings you speed, and you still hope that maybe a 23-year-old can develop a little bit more with his bat and potentially be the second baseman in the future. I think most likely, if the Mets are trying to think about their plans in 2026 and beyond, my guess is they're envisioning Carson Bench in center, and when you have Nimmo and you have Soto, that's potentially your outfield locked up. The only place for Jet Williams, if you're not moving him, would be second base. So I think that because you have Jet Williams, Acuña could be more expendable because, theoretically, right, if my nightmare scenario happens, you could always grab Jet from AA and stick him at shortstop. I think because you have Jet Williams, I could come around that I wouldn't be too upset about the idea of trading Acuña for Robert. But I also think the Mets should be in a position where they're waiting until the very end on this and playing the game of chicken against the White Sox until they blink. The problem with that, you might end up with nothing in center field. And it's just a matter of how much are the Mets willing to gamble on not getting him if he really is their number one option. And at the same time, if he is, and you really believe Luis Robert's going to be that missing piece, then I guess you sort of have to be willing to trade up a guy like Acuña or trade a guy like Acuña, because ultimately, if you believe that his ceiling is a utility man off your bench, which is not a bad thing, I think Acuña can be very valuable in that role, as I've already described. You can't be afraid to give that up if it's the piece that's going to put you over the top. I still prefer the Mets to get this done with prospects and just keep all their big league guys, but you got to give to get. And if ultimately it's 5:35 and you haven't addressed that center field position and you got 25 minutes until the trade deadline on Thursday, and the White Sox call you back and they say, all right, we'll do Acuña for Robert straight up, I don't know if you can say no to that. My guess right now is they're probably asking for Acuña plus. And if I'm the Mets, I'm saying no chance. If you're giving up multiple pieces for Luis Robert as a rental, it better be a couple of prospects. So we'll see how the Robert stuff continues to transpire. There's so much smoke here that it feels like the Mets are the team to get him, but typically it's hard to predict what happens at the deadline anyway. So maybe he ends up somewhere else. And if he does, The other option, center field, we've already talked about them a bunch on this show. Cedric Mullins has been really struggling for the Orioles. I don't know if he is an ideal fit. Harrison Bader, though, coming back does make a lot of sense. You look at what he's done this season. Hasn't been playing center field as much because of Byron Buxton, but when he has, 2 outs above average in center, 4 outs above average in left, 3 defensive runs saved in center, 8 defensive runs saved in left. He's been a great defender as always, hitting 254, 337 on base, 439 slug, 12 home runs, 10 stolen bases. He's been an above average hitter, a 118 WRC plus. Remember, WRC plus is weighted runs created plus, measuring hitters on a league average of 100. So a 118 WRC plus means he's 18% better than your league average hitter. So Harrison Bader is having a really nice season. I think you'd pick him up and you could plug him in as your starting center fielder. And quite honestly, I'd almost even consider a world where you DFA Tyrone Taylor, which sounds a little bit crazy, and it's probably more likely that they would just option somebody down until September call-ups and then bring up an Acuña or a Mauricio again. But I don't know. I really start to wonder what Tyrone Taylor's role is going to be if you pick up a Bader or if you pick up a Luis Robert, because those guys do a lot of the same things with better upside offensively. So we'll see. The other guy that is potentially on the market now as a center fielder is Joe Adell, but I don't know if he's the best fit for the Mets because he's brutal defensively. He's actually worse defensively than Jeff McNeil, minus 10 defensive runs saved, minus 6 outs above average, has hit 21 home runs this season, but he doesn't feel like a David Stearns fit in center. So I'm still looking at Bader and Robert as the 2 most likely outcomes here if the Mets do pick up a center fielder. But the other bet that they've been linked to now is Brandon Lowe, who Andy Martinez says the Mets have been in on for over a year. Now, if you told me last year the Mets had traded for Brandon Lowe instead of Jesse Winker, I would have been way more in on that deal than I was on the Winker trade, because Lowe has a longer track record of, I don't know if I should say a longer track record, but Winker had that really prolonged stretch of struggling before last season. That concerned me at the time, and I didn't know if he brought enough power to the DH spot. Well, Brandon Lowe has 19 home runs this season. He's got a 5.26 slug right now against right-handed pitching. His numbers against righties is elite. He's not great against lefties, but you could platoon him in the DH spot with Starling Marte. Essentially, he could be your new Jesse Winker. And this year he's hitting against right-handed pitching, 292 with a 344 on base, 526 slug, 870 OPS, 139 WRC plus. He's been very good, making $10.5 million this season with an $11.5 million club option for next season. I'm intrigued by Brandon Lowe, but I don't know what he is going to fetch on the market with the lack of bats that are available. So that's the one thing that I don't know about. And I also am not completely sold on the fit because you have a lot of second basemen. Again, you could have him as your DH, but he is a natural second baseman, so he could be your second baseman, but he's been brutal defensively this year. So do you plug in Brandon Lowe at second and allow yourselves to be able to DH Vientos? Do you play Vientos at third, Beatty at second, DH Lowe, and then I guess relegate Mauricio? I don't know. I still feel like the infield of this team might be best served to just stand pat. And if you do get a center fielder, why not Jeff McNeil comes in and that helps you out, as another option at second base. And maybe it's McNeil at second, Beatty at third, and Vientos is DHing. So the Mets have to figure a lot of things out when it comes to which bat is the right fit, what's the cost to acquire that bat, and how does it shake up their mix? How do they come out of it as the best possible team, leveraging the young players who are swinging it well right now, but maybe don't have the track record of a veteran that you might be able to acquire at this deadline. So that's where we're at with the bats. I want to talk about the arms in the final segment and also spend a little bit of time on the Rays in particular, because they seem like a team that might go full bore on a sell, and the Mets have made trades with the Rays in the past. There's a good working relationship there. Maybe this is the team to get some pitching. We'll talk about that more here to close out the show in just a minute. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, You just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know personally right now with the trade deadline, everything I'm doing with the show as well as just baseball, sometimes I can lag a little bit in the middle of my day, and 5-hour energy really does give me that boost that I need. And also when it comes to golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the beverage cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used without or with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order Transfusion 5-hour energy shots today. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, the Mets are still shopping for relievers, and they are potentially looking at starting pitchers who could make a playoff start for them this year. They are not looking for depth arms. So that brings me to the Tampa Bay Rays, who might be going full sell as the AL East is very competitive right now with the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and the Red Sox. And you have some teams in the wild card race that are surging like the Rangers. This might be the time to fold up shop on some pieces and try to replenish their core moving forward. And they have a lot of arms to discuss. So we're going to open up with Zach Littell and Drew Rasmussen, two different starting pitchers the Mets could target. Littell is a rental 3.72 ERA, but an innings eater, 128 in the third innings pitched. But he fits more of the back end of the rotation, middle of the rotation type. I don't know if you look at Littell and think, oh, he's going to start a playoff game. So I don't think that's necessarily the fit, although it's not a bad throw-in for a trade. If you were to get Brandon Lowe, throw Littell in there, and at least the depth at the back end of your rotation is better. But I think more likely the arm that they would love to get their hands on is Rasmussen. He was an all-star this year, 2.96 ERA in 21 starts, does not walk anyone, barely gives up any home runs. His career home run per nine is well under one at 0.72. He has a fastball, a cutter, and a sinker that he uses for 90% of his pitches. Just a master at working all quadrants of the zone with different movements, able to go east-west, able to go north-south. He just has a real feel for his arsenal and a guy that can just pitch to contact, keep the ball on the ground, keep the ball in the yard, and absolutely somebody that can start in October. So if you could get Drew Rasmussen and Brandon Lowe in a trade, that's a home run, and that's one that I'd be willing to give up one of the young infielders and some top prospects for, because that really could move the needle in multiple ways. You also have a couple of relievers that are potentially on the block from the Rays. Pete Fairbanks, their closer, making just under $4 million this year, then a $7 million club option for next season, has a 2.75 ERA and 18 saves. But I'll tell you, Garrett Cleavinger actually looks like the better pitcher of the two right now. 2.41 ERA in 42 games, and he's striking out 32.5% of the batters that he's faced. So he has been lights out for them, could slide into the back end of the Mets bullpen as well. If you could get one of those forearms and Brandon Lowe, I'd be more interested if it's Lowe on his own. While I still could understand the merits of it, and I do think he'd make the Mets better, I would be more inclined to see the Mets just stay in-house and use whatever assets that they would give up in that type of a trade to just continue to bolster their pitching staff instead. Or again, trying to find a center fielder, because then your whole team makes sense. I mean, if you really look at the Mets center field situation, if you don't believe that Jeff McNeil is a solid starting center fielder, I think he's done a good job out there, but you see it on the balls that he can't come in and catch that other guys would have. You're definitely giving up something there, but offensively, you're just giving away at bats with Tyrone Taylor. If you don't really have a viable all-around center fielder, then that might have to be the thing that you prioritize, and that's where the Robert trade still makes the most sense, more than Brandon Lowe. But you have the Phillies, you have the Padres, other teams are in on Robert, so it's not a guarantee that the Mets end up winning that sweepstakes, if you can even call it a sweepstakes. But that's where we are at with all the rumors. The Rays are a team. Actually, one more that I forgot to mention here. Paul Blackburn, my prediction, will get moved at this deadline. He is being shopped right now. We talked about him being in rehab purgatory. Apparently, he's slated for another rehab start on Saturday, but any team that trades for him could probably activate him and have him start in the big leagues on Saturday instead. He is not going to get you much, but you clear a roster spot, you maybe get a flyer prospect, or as I've talked about, if you do trade for a starting pitcher from another team, you might be able to staple Paul Blackburn to the deal as a way to offset salaries, and then just give that other team an arm that they can slide into their rotation for the final couple months and get them through a season if they really are a team that is completely out of it, like a Marlins, or maybe the Diamondbacks fall out of it even more. That's a guy that can just help you get through the final couple months of the season. So I do expect that Paul Blackburn is pretty likely to get traded. And I think that the Mets at this point are most likely to pick up one top-end reliever. I am a little bit doubtful that they get two the more I look at the sort of outlook of their bullpen and the pieces that fit into it, because right now you got Edwin Diaz, you got Brooks Raley, Reed Garrett, Gregory Soto, Jose Budo, who does not have any options, so you can't just get rid of him. You have Ryan Stanek. If you were to pick up one more arm, that would give you 7, and you can keep a spot open to be flexible, because let's just say the Mets don't pick up a starting pitcher, and they decide that the best course of action, and I'm not against this, is just rolling with McLean and or Sproat. You could add those guys to the 40, and with your potential need for a 6-man rotation at points, drop them in for a spot start, and then option them off and put a reliever back in. Like, you could be flexible with that spot, or you could just pitch a man down in that bullpen and have 6 arms in that rotation. Another thing of note, Huascar Brazoban was optioned. Like I said, I didn't talk about it in the first segment. I talked about Chris Davinsky helping blow the game. Davinsky was signed to a major league deal, and Brazoban was sent down. According to reports, the plan is to get Brazoban to be built up again so he could be a multi-inning reliever, because he was such a dependable high leverage arm. The Mets sort of shortened him up inadvertently throughout this season. So this is an opportunity to, for one, give him a little bit of rest. He'll have 3 days off between every appearance, and then he'll get up to 35 to 40 pitches and be a multi-inning option for the Mets, because you never know. They might need to do some bullpen games down the stretch or get creative in different ways. So having Brazoban stretched out is a good thing. And also, I think at this stage, if Brazoban doesn't throw another pitch for the New York Mets this season, it was a successful year. He was huge for this team early on, helped them build up that cushion, a 3.83 ERA. And how many innings did he pitch so far? He's 44 games, 51 2/3 innings pitched. That's really good production for a guy that you picked up for next to nothing last deadline. So again, this is the last we hear of Brazoban this season. That means that the Mets went out and did a lot for their bullpen at this deadline, which is going to be important. They got to at least get one arm. They got 2, it's going to kind of hurt their flexibility, but also if you got 2 lights out arms, your bullpen can really shorten games. So that would be pretty exciting. The starting pitching market, we'll see. Center field market, we will see. And we'll just see on these young players. Mark Vientos, one thing I didn't get to talk about in yesterday's show because I didn't read all the quotes, he sort of talked about being in trade rumors and being doubted and how people forget really quickly what you've done. I will say that, performance dictates reaction, and it dictates circumstance. And if Mark Vientos had performed well and performed like we thought he could, and I still believe he can, both defensively at third base and offensively, this wouldn't even be a discussion right now. It's because he struggled so much. It's because he's been a net negative player by WAR that you are in these trade talks. But I also think that Mark Vientos with a chip on his shoulder is the best version of Mark Vientos, and I think that chip has been placed. If he stays with the Mets, I really think that he's going to be a big, big part of this team down the stretch, whether that is at DH or third base. I could see it going either way. I really could see a world where Mark Vientos, come playoff time, is the Mets starting third baseman again, and Brett Beatty's over at second. Or you never know. Maybe the offense for Beatty doesn't stay at a rate that they like enough where they decide to have Vientos at third, and maybe it's Jeff McNeil at second, and they traded for Brandon Lowe and Luis Robert, and they got a crazy deep team. I doubt it. I think it's probably one bat or the other, but their Mets are sitting in a spot right now where everything is at their disposal with the assets they have in their farm system, and they have a lot of needs they're trying to address in a short window here, and this is what the deadline's all about. You can't imagine the amount of conversations David Stearns has had over the past week as they try to figure out what's on the market, what's available to them, and where they can buy. And, these things always come down to just putting your best offer in and there's usually a couple teams vying for these specific guys, and if they like whatever your best piece was the most, you get a deal done. So we'll see if the Mets can pull off a couple big ones here to improve their outlook this season. It's going to be a lot of fun to cover whatever they do over the next couple of days. As always, thank you all for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. And after your second watch, head over and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that takes you through all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts and league-wide experts that'll take you through all the games. You find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.